I know we said it for a couple of episodes now, but because the offseason is pushed back for us covering this team, and we got to see this team live through a couple of weeks of postseason play, I'm all messed up on the timing on when we normally do things. It's so weird that the World Series is taking place right now, and I'm getting ready to ask you some of these fill-in-the-blank preseason or off-season preview questions. This is stuff that we normally do a week after the season's over. And I'm getting ready to ask you it now as the World Series is going on. I don't know. Does this just feel messed up to you? I feel like we're behind, but we're not really behind. We just have the normal content that we get to, and it's happening now. I don't know. Just off.
I've had 3 stories within the last 10 days that I've started to write and then scrapped because of what you said. The timing just doesn't feel right. Do we want to keep talking about the season that was? No, it's about to be November, right? But it just ended. It's a weird time. I'm really struggling with the look back versus look ahead element. And, it's I think in the aftermath of the season, you have sort of your post-mortem, and then typically I'll go into hibernation for a little bit. But it's like I can't go into hibernation for too long because like Rule 5 deadlines are coming up and free agency is starting and the winter meetings are only a month away. And yeah, it comes at you fast when the team makes a run.
It's a good thing. I prefer this. We still would be stretching when you get to December. Then there's that lull after the winter meetings. I'm glad that we're in this scenario here where we can do a little bit of both. I think it has been said within our Discord, and hi, welcome to the show. It's the Selby's Godcast. I'm TJ, that's Zack. Follow us and find us at patreon.com/Selby's Godcast if you'd like to help support the show. And, of course, you get the one episode every week during the off-season to go along with this free episode that we do every other week, typically in the off-season. Our Discord, I think the sentiment has largely been they prefer looking ahead, push the story forward as opposed to looking too much back. And that's what I tried to do with these questions. You take a little bit of what you know right now, and you sprinkle that onto what you think is going to happen in the future and what you're trying to project forward. So I've got a list of 8 fill-in-the-blanks. Are you prepared to go through these? Are you confident in your abilities as you've been taking some downtime to be a dad that you're going to be able to actively answer these totally accurately?
No.
Why did I know that was going to be the case?
I mean,
Should
what am
I
I
start
supposed
with something very
to
difficult?
do?
Would you like to warm up?
Yeah, let's ease into this. It's hard. Let me preface it by saying this. Like, we had nothing to talk about last offseason, as we've documented many times. Do you miss not talking about Bradley Zimmer? Also, is Bob Evans sponsoring us now? Why do you keep showing that side of the cup? Anyway, it's there are so many things.
No. You mean this one right here? This one right here up next to my smiling face that you could see if you're watching this on YouTube?
You can find TJ
No,
and me
sponsoring
down
us.
on the farm. Isn't that their slogan?
Sure, maybe like 6 slogans ago. I don't know. What were you saying?
There is so much. Everything with this roster this winter is like interwoven. So like if you're saying, hey, they need to add a first base DH type, that's fine. But then that's going to have ramifications on Nolan Jones and Gabriel Arias and Josh Naylor and a bunch of other people, Owen Miller and etc. So there are so many things we can tackle where it's like, it's almost overwhelming in a sense. It's like, I've thought about, okay, should I start this offseason by writing something on Ahmed Rosario? And it's like, but if I deep dive on Ahmed Rosario, then I'm going to have to figure out what the future is for Freeman and Arias and Rocchio. And like, it's just, there's so much. And I think it makes it exciting because there's a lot of material to talk about. We prefer this than the opposite. And they're in a place to build up and be aggressive and think about how to craft another winning roster, but at the same time, it's just like it's hard. It's hard to wrap your head around, and I think I've almost resisted it a little bit to this point because it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, and there's no downside here for you. If you make the wrong decision in your article, we point and laugh and say, Zack was wrong, but that's it. That's the end. You continue on. Imagine being a front office member that has to get these right, has to nail it. It was a fun time for this organization because, as we've covered at length, there were no expectations. There are now expectations. And as fun as this offseason can be, it's also a sort of turning point for how much fun you're going to have over the next several years. It's very important that they nail a very, I think, few but very key decisions that have ramifications on many things. And Rosario is right there. It's a complicated topic, as we've talked about for months now, because a lot of players value him within that clubhouse. How much weight do you put on that? How much are you willing to be worthy, thinking that guy's worthy of signing to an extension if all he is a very good, capable, average shortstop? It's a very difficult decision because it's not just one thing. It's a lot of younger players that would also benefit from an ability to play. But can you play those guys? I know what Ahmed Rosario is. I don't yet know what Gabriel Arias is. I don't yet know what Tyler Freeman is. So that's what makes this interesting and fun, but I'm sure also maddening and worthy of losing some sleep over. So let's get into these. I've prepared 8 of them. We'll start with one that is more your opinion as opposed to what you think the team is going to do. The player I'd most like signed to an extension this winter/spring is blank.
I hate this topic.
Your personal preference.
Yeah, but I don't know. The reason I don't like these, not this question in particular, but people ask all the time for an answer, and it's hard to offer accurate insight on this because I don't know how much money Tristan McKenzie thinks he's worth and is willing to demand in a negotiation. And the team's not going to tell you exact numbers on what they think a player's worth. So it's hard. That said, I guess I'll go Andres Gimenez. I think his floor is pretty high. I don't know. I don't have a lot of analysis here. I think of the options. He's a pretty good guy to bet on, and having some stability long-term in the middle infield is good. It allows you to then make more contextualized decisions on what to do with all your prospects and Ahmed Rosario.
I think that is a fair and well-articulated answer. I am probably right there with you. He is, of the many guys that we will talk about this winter and early spring, I think he's the one that I would worry the most about commanding a bigger payday from somebody else. Tristan maybe would get there. Pitching's weird, though. You could say Stephen Kwan. I feel really good about Stephen Kwan. Yeah, I do too. Do I think he's the type of player that's going to go out there and earn some massive contract? I'm kind of skeptical just based on the type of player he is. Now, that could change if he develops more as a hitter and becomes a double-digit home run threat. Perhaps. But the player he is right now, I'm maybe not as concerned about him having an inflated salary number as I am Gimenez. I would want to take care of that now. And the solid floor of good defense, good speed, solid hitter, even if he is not a 6-win player, if he's 4, that's really solid. I would love to lock that up in the middle infield. And if he needed to go play shortstop, he could probably now go back to do that if you want him to. I think it makes the most sense, and he's also the safest bet. Just
And
because of all of the things that he does well.
It's your one chance. Because he's going to get arbitration starting a year from now, I believe. And he had a decent signing bonus, so I don't know that he's hurting for money. I don't know his personal wealth details, but you usually only get one or two chances to lock someone up at a price that you might find palatable. This would be that chance. If he has another year like he just did, and then he's going into arbitration, it's probably over.
Yeah, I agree with you. That leads us to question number 2. The person most likely extended is blank.
See, that's the question I hate. Because we never talked about Straw or Clase last year. But the big reason no one talks about that is because you don't know what people want. And it's not, that's not to say like you can't do reporting on that. I could go around the room and ask every single player, hey, do you want to sign an extension? They'd all say, yeah, sure, that'd be great. You don't know what they really think and whether it's realistic, whether it's feasible to get the team to agree to that. So I don't know. I guess based on timelines and salaries and whatnot, I would say Jimenez or maybe Quan. But I don't know. Quan was a 5th round pick. I don't I don't know what he wants. Does he want $100 million? Who knows? Probably not. So maybe I'd say him because he's so early in his career. And also with him, he's assuming he stays in the major leagues, he would be Super 2 eventually. You lost the service time manipulation because he was on the roster opening day. So he might make sense to talk to. Just lock up beyond his eventual free agency. And I think he's got some pretty safe tools too. He's not going to just suddenly forget how to lay off of low curveballs. He's not suddenly going to unlearn how to make a ton of contact. Especially in his mid-20s.
You wouldn't think. I don't think it has to be a pick one for this team. The goal to me should be to sign multiple players to an extension because I don't know how much they can do to this roster outside of adding one big difference maker that's going to be worthwhile. But they need to use some of the finances that they have. And they need to take advantage of where they're at in their life cycle with all these younger players. So to me, a successful offseason is going to involve locking up multiple players to extensions. That's going to feel very successful on top of maybe one big sort of splash that they should make. Thinking about that we didn't consider Straw, that we didn't necessarily consider Clase, and keeping that in mind, how about Cal Quantrill? And I think of that because for him personally, maybe he doesn't publicly admit this, but if you think about it, he's never going to be one of the best starters in baseball. Probably never going to be one of the best starters on his team as far as just one or two. Always going to be somewhere in that 3-4 category. I believe he's a safe bet outside of injury, which is tough to predict as it is, to just be solid. So get that locked up for another, to at least have that cost controlled, know what he's going to be. And if he is a starting pitcher that's giving you volume and he's solid, he will always have value if that ever becomes a problem. So you could always turn around and trade him if you wanted to, as long as he's providing volume on the field.
Yeah, I guess
safe bet, give you some cost control, maybe give you a couple of options on the back end if you'd like them.
So figuring out the rotation is a very under-discussed. I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of people are just saying, all right, you got to add a bat. Who's it going to be? Murphy, Walker, what are we doing here? But the rotation is kind of fascinating. Obviously Bieber's the huge question mark, what his future holds. And Savali and Plesac, maybe they'll be back, maybe they won't. But the big thing is, like, who are your pillars, right? Because the next rotation could have Espino, Williams, Bybee, Logan Allen. I mean, you still have Curry, Gaddis, Morris. Like, there's a lot. But you have to build around something. And you have to build around something immediately because you're trying to win a World Series next season. So if I'm thinking that direction, sure. Quantrill. I mean, that obviously depends on the price. If he's got a high floor, low ceiling, and you just figure, all right, this is going to be a number 3, number 4 guy, and he'll be consistent for another 5 years, fine. But you need to lock him in at that price. And like, I think his ARB number is projected to be about $6 million, and he's got 2 more after that, so that could get pricey pretty quickly. So again, that just comes down to money. I don't know. His dad played in the majors for 2 decades, so I think he knows how this game works. But the other thing is, like, I could go back to your first question and say the player I'd most want to sign an extension is Bieber. But obviously, like, the reason I didn't is because I assume it's going to be too pricey for what the Guardians want to pay. But in terms of roster building and the move that would help the most moving forward, long-term and short-term, it's probably that.
Yeah, I don't disagree on especially about the point on the Bieber thing. It just feels so unrealistic that that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like I don't even consider it a realistic option. It should be. They should continue to have conversations. I'm not saying just don't pursue it at all. But there's just not a lot of traction there that leads me to believe that it's a real thing. I would love to see McKenzie sign to an extension this offseason. With any pitcher, you're going to be battling some giant risk here. McKenzie took a lot of that off the table for me this year, that he was not only providing volume, but he was getting better as the innings were piling up for him this year. That, to me, it was on top of the fact that he's pitching deep into game 6th, 7th, 8th innings, and he's holding on to his stuff. These are the sorts of things with his frame that we always were wondering. Is he going to wear down? Is he only going to be capable of giving you 4 or 5 innings? He shut all that down this year. So I'm more than on the side of sign McKenzie to an extension. But I don't know what his motivations are. That one's a tough one. Quantrill, to me, feels like it's a nice combination of he would probably like to have some security, know where he's going to be. The team would love to have the certainty of what he's going to cost. And if it means you add another couple of years on the back end to just have that option, I think it's all positive. I'm not saying that's my most coveted outcome, but we're talking about the most likely things to happen. Number 3. This is sort of open-ended, so you can do whatever you want with this. The thing I have the most confidence in is blank.
Is in, if I pretend...
If you even say that an asteroid is going to one day hit the Earth and we're all going to die, then I am walking away right now.
The thing I have the most confidence in is if I pretend to eat my son's nose, he will laugh hysterically. Never fails. The thing I have the most confidence in...
Hold on. Do you think that you would laugh hysterically if I also pretended to eat your nose?
Maybe just out of sheer bizarreness.
We just all assume that we've grown out of that stage,
Yeah.
But when was the last time someone pretended to eat your nose? You don't know if you would laugh at that.
That's a good point. Thing I have the most confidence in, probably Chris Antonetti teasing that he has some absolute mega deal that we'd never guess. But he can't tell us what it is. I don't know. Not much. And are you talking in terms of the roster and transactions wise?
It could be a performance that happened this year that you really believed in. It could be some element of a front office. It could literally be anything. It could even be a boat.
You're talking to the guy who predicted for like 7 consecutive seasons Franmil Reyes would hit 40 home runs. I'll go that Stephen Kwan is legitimate. I think, you look at his season and you think, how can this guy get better? Aren't pitchers going to learn something that's going to help them? What's crazy is, he went into that funk in May, and that was it. Like, there was never another week-long dry spell. Maybe he'd go 0 for 8, 0 for 10, but he'd follow that up really quick with a 3 for 4. And I just think that ceiling is so high. He's such a smart player, and he's so good with the mental preparation. All those things that you can't quantify, but teams are trying to figure out a way to do that so that they can determine if a player, how much they can improve and how quickly they can move on from failure. Like, he just is through the roof on all that stuff. And I just think he's set up well. The thing that's going to be really fascinating is the power, because people were hinting to me since spring training that he can hit for some power, and we've talked about it. He's just got to, because your strike zone awareness is elite, and you're going to make contact, pitchers are eventually going to throw you something over the plate, and it's just when you're in that count where you feel comfortable doing it, and it's the right situation, turn on it and hit it hard. He did it in Yankee Stadium, so I don't know what his slash line looks like year to year. Maybe there's some variance there. I'll be interested to see with if that helps the lack of shifting, if he tries to pull the ball more. But I think I think he's your leadoff hitter for a long time.
I was going to go with Kwan. You're right that I have such a supreme confidence based on everything we saw that it's repeatable. I mean, just look at in the playoffs, he was basically the same hitter that he was in the regular season. How many people talked at length that he was no longer a rookie anymore? Whenever he passed that threshold, everyone said, hey, he's still a rookie. He's in the rookie of the year. No one looks at this guy like he's a rookie. He looks like he has been a professional for 5, 6, 7 years in the major leagues. But I'm not going to pick the same thing you just picked. That's no fun. So how about this? The thing I have the most confidence in, that Ahmed Rosario is going to play a full season. He's going to hit over 280, somewhere between 283 to 287, and finish with 2.4 wins above replacement, and that everyone's going to want him off the team. That's my prediction. Maybe not everybody. It's like a half and half split.
So that's going to happen in Cleveland?
Just so consistent. Yes, it's going to happen in Cleveland. He's just so consistently solid, not totally sexy. Good-looking dude, but I just mean in the way that he plays the game. I have faith that he's not a superstar. He's not one of the best shortstops in baseball, but he maintains being what this team needs in the middle infield. It's just a stabilizing, I know what this guy is, and I'm not saying that it's not a roller coaster to get to the numbers that he gets to. It absolutely is. We've chronicled it. He'll hit 183 in April and then hit 450 for a 3-week stretch and be near the league lead in base hits. It's the type of player he is. Is he miscast by being the number 2 hitter on this team? Yeah, he'd be better off somewhere probably in the 6 or 7 range if you could draw it up the way that you want. But that's not his fault, his problem. I know what he is. He's going to be the same every year, and since he really kind of came into his own in 2019, the only time he took a step back was the shortened season when he played 46 games. 46 games in 2020. And the Mets made a determination on the guy. So that's what I have confidence in. It's going to be very average next year.
Do you think is it more difficult to put up a really, really, really good season or to put up the same exact numbers year after year? Like, is it more impressive next season if he hits 320, 400, 500, or if he hits again 284, 317, 412. What's more
I
impressive?
think the consistency.
Yeah.
I would think it would be very difficult. And something like batting average, where it can be so fluky. It can just, a few base hits here or there can completely shift what a batting average could be. Whereas opposed to, like, if someone finished with the same WRC plus, you might be a 125, so 25% better than league average. But aren't there different roads that you could take to being 25% above league average?
Mm-hmm.
Could just focus on one statistic like batting average and just be that consistent at it. It's not a totally meaningful stat. But I think if you're really good at getting base hits, it is somewhat meaningful, and it helps determine how you can build the rest of the lineup around that sort of guy, as opposed to a guy that draws a ton of walks but maybe doesn't put the ball in play, so maybe that's not the guy you want with a lot of traffic on the bases. Maybe I want a guy that makes a ton of contact and just causes the other team to go into full panic mode because running the bases like crazy. You ready for number 4?
Yeah.
No, you're not. The thing I'm most skeptical about is blank.
I'm torn between two. One, I'm a little skeptical that Bo Naylor just comes in and he's the starting catcher. He plays 140 games and posts a 800 OPS. But we'll revisit that maybe later. Not that I've seen the questions you're going to ask, but I'm going to go with, I'm a little skeptical of the outfield. I believe in Quan. They seem to believe in Miles Straw bouncing back at the plate, or at least they're saying that so that, like, the Marlins believe that. But, between Straw and Oscar Gonzalez, I still don't exactly know what he is. I think there's a little bit of just uncertainty, and it's not even regression. It's just like I could see a scenario where it's June and you want to replace one or two members of your outfield, or maybe Gonzalez is a better fit at designated hitter. I just don't quite. I'm not sold yet, and I think Gonzalez is really impressive. I think he deserves to be the opening day right fielder, and I'm really, really intrigued by him. Don't get me wrong. I just don't know for sure. So I think if you're the Guardians, I think it's important that you have a roadmap for if you need help. If you can, I think there's a place for Straw on the team where he's not getting 600 plate appearances, and you're maybe maximizing his value, and also giving at bats to someone like Will Brennan or Nolan Jones or eventually George Valera. And that's probably the way I'd go. I mean, the big thing is, do they think Quan can play some center field? Or is Brennan equipped to play center field in the majors? I'm a little skeptical that, Francona said at the end of the season, their outfield is basically set. Like, he likes the three guys they have. And I'm just skeptical that it's going to go swimmingly, and there will be no hiccups there. So I don't know that means they need to go out and add Brian Reynolds. If you could do that, obviously go do it. But I just think there's reason to sketch out 400 at bats for Will Brennan, or just to have someone. I mean, there are too many people here, right? If you are set on your outfield, then what the hell are you doing with Nolan Jones? And how are you going to eventually get Valera in there? Where does Brendan fit? Where does Richie Palacios fit? Will Benson? But I think you need to have somebody there that you trust or that you really believe in, just as insurance. That's all.
Yeah, I think you can be skeptical about any younger player that hasn't given you multiple years of consistency. There are a number of players that have come up and caught fire and been great in their first year and then just not ever able to recapture exactly the sort of magic they had. So on one hand, it's unfair. who am I to say Andres Gimenez can't do that again? He's not every other failed middle infielder that has had a good year and then faded into obscurity. Same thing for Oscar Gonzalez. He's not those players that have taken a step back. But it's all I have to go on right now until they prove to us whether or not they are mainstays. They are now, but I mean, this is always going to be a constant evaluation every single year. I would say on one hand, it could be Andres Gimenez because I'm not sure he can get back to just assume he's going to be a 6-win player every year. I don't know. Would love to be wrong about that. I feel like more it's safer to expect him to be a little bit closer to like 4.5. This is a really, it might get lost. This was a really special season for Andres Gimenez. But I'll come back to the man that continues to make us skeptical and continues to prove us wrong. I don't think you could just hand the right field job to Oscar Gonzalez and assume he's going to continue to take steps forward, that he's going to be this hitter that you can't really explain how he's succeeding, but he finds a way to succeed. I'm welcoming the chance I'm not writing him off completely. I'm not saying don't give this guy plate appearances. Sure, give him a chance to prove why he should be in there, but make sure your backup plan is really good. Make sure that it's not just saying he's the right fielder, and if he's not as good this year, then uh-oh. You need to have a plan in place. And even if that's go get another outfielder and push Gonzalez to DH and then just make him continue to prove that he needs to be in there every single day, that's fine. I'm cool with that. So I'm a little skeptical that it's just going to continue. But in the same vein, I'm not saying that it can't. He's such a difficult person to know what to expect he's going to be because he doesn't succeed in typical ways. And yet he goes out there and proves that he can succeed with the tools that he has and flailing at everything before getting to 2 strikes and then somehow finding a way to focus more on contact and using his long limbs and covering the strike zone the way that he does. We'll see. But I guess I would say I'm most skeptical about just assuming that he's going to be as good this year as he was last year. This is the biggest offseason for blank.
Probably Josh Naylor. Inherently it's a big offseason because he can finally train normally. And it's a big offseason because, they need more from him, I think. He either needs to prove he can play every day and be at least adequate against lefties, or he's got to just be unbelievable against righties and agile enough to play first base. So I think it's a big offseason for him just to get in whatever type of shape puts him in best position to do those things. And just to catch his breath. I mean, the last, 2 years of his life have been pretty crazy. So I think it's a big offseason for him. I think, he and Bo lived together, trained together last winter. I think it'll be cool if they do that again this year, both being on the major league roster. But yeah, it's important for him. I think he needs. He's a pretty big, not question mark, but like key point of emphasis for 2023. I think he needs a good year. I think he needs to expand his game a little bit to lock down that spot long term.
Wouldn't you say he's the sort of guy that thrives off of having that to prove?
Sure.
That this could be beneficial for him to feel like he still needs to prove all of his worth, that he's an everyday player, that he's more than even he showed this year. I feel like he's the sort of player that is motivated as hell by that and can see every comment about him being out of shape. And not once did he moan and say, dudes, I couldn't walk last off season. What did you want me to jump on the treadmill with a broken leg? Like, what did you want me to do? I couldn't do much in season because my freaking feet were banged up to all to hell. He didn't complain about that. This would be a very interesting offseason where he just gets to focus on, making sure that his wheels are healthy, but also focusing on his hitting and how he can develop certain things in his swing and his balance and using his lower half and maybe getting better against lefties. Splits are weird. I don't always believe in splits until you get a ton of sample size, and at that point, it's over multiple years, so that's noisy. I think you can trust just some in lefty against lefty. There's going to be some disadvantage for a lot of guys. Can he get better at that? I don't know. He'll have to prove that. But I just think he benefits from maybe everyone questioning, and not even that strong, but just wondering what he is going to be this year. He seems to thrive based on that sort of energy.
Yeah, I mean, he give him credit, even with his banged up leg. That guy hustled. There were a lot of times that he went like first to third, and I felt pain in my leg in the press box. He definitely did not complain. He definitely went through a lot. I mean, you could see it just walking through the clubhouse, not moving like a 25-year-old should move. But that's why I think it's. I'm sure in the back of his mind, obviously he wanted to keep playing as long as he could, and I don't know that there's anybody that loves showing up to the ballpark every day as much as he does. I mean, everybody saw it. Like, it takes a special type of person to headbutt your manager and to slam a helmet against the wall and yell at fans, all in a weird, crazed, good way, I guess. But so yeah, it's to your point. I do think. I think he understands the situation, and I think he expects more from himself. And that's not to. I mean, he was a very productive player in many ways for them. I just think there's more there, and I think they need more from him.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm willing to give him that benefit of the doubt because of how banged up he was this year. That there's still more in there. And as you said, still a very good player. That you weren't disappointed when you penciled him in most days. The one player I'd like to see Cleveland acquire is blank.
I still think Sean Murphy makes sense if the price is right. We've talked about it over and over. It makes no sense for Oakland to keep him. They don't have the leverage here. I just think there's enough at bats between catcher, DH. You know, you could teach Bo Naylor first base. He's athletic. I think there's enough at bats there, and I think it would help. Obviously, if you want to go the defensive route and bring back Hedges for his leadership, fine. But the fact that like Murphy has won a Gold Glove, like he's no slouch defensively, and everything he gives you offensively, you're turning a D to an A. That's can make such a difference overall. So I would say him. I mean, there are a number of players, outfielders, first base types. Like they have the flexibility, the positional versatility, the financial flexibility, the trade capital to do whatever the hell they want. So I don't know that you could name a name that I'd be like, no, thank you. But I think Murphy's a really good fit. I think a starting pitcher too. If you can get a really good starting pitcher, someone they believe they could unlock more out of, I think that makes sense too. I think the main thing is, like, I hate just comparing them to the Cavs all the time, but like, go make your Donovan Mitchell move. It's a little different in baseball. One player is not 20% of your lineup, but
just like that, huh? Just go get that done. All right.
But I
fine.
think, I think it's the time. I mean, the time is everything is lined up perfectly. Like you need to consolidate prospects. Well, what do you know? You're a contender looking to add another impact piece to a playoff roster. Perfect. Go make it happen.
I mean, acquiring depth would be critical for this team. They were so blessed. Even they had injuries, but guys were able to stay on the field for the most part and play through them. A lot of seasons you don't have that sort of blessing. And so I think having some depth, more proven depth may be beneficial. Maybe you just rely on your strong minor leagues there. But how many areas of this roster could they make a WAR jump of 5 wins. You're not going to do that in left field, center field, right field. Well, maybe center field, you can make the case. Third base,
Second
shortstop,
base.
second, first. You need to get that 11-win player in here.
Mm-hmm.
The
Barry
only
Bonds.
spot you can do that is at catcher. The only spot. I can't believe there are still people saying, well, Murphy's not that good. He was a 122 WRC plus this year. Throughout his career has been at the very least above average, a 116 in his career. So he's 16% above league average. That's all players, not catchers, all players. You take a 122, which is where he was at last year, and compare that to the 40s that you were getting from Austin Hedges. Think you are going from 60% below league average hitter. You're now plugging in a guy that's 20% better than league average. That's not D to A. That is my college scores up to being one of the top in the class. That's me compared to someone going to medical school. Okay, that's what that is. So yes, Murphy makes a ton of sense, even having Bo Naylor. Murphy catches 2 games, Naylor catches 1. Murphy stays in the lineup. He's DHing. He's playing against lefties. You're finding a way to keep that bat in there so he can still manage to, I think, let's see. He was in 148 games for Oakland this year, 612 plate appearances. He's rocking a 122. You're keeping his bat in the lineup even if he's not catching. You can't thrust a young catcher like Bo Naylor in there and think that he's going to be just fine. It doesn't work like that. That's way too much to put on a younger player. Ease him in. You could have a couple of years with it just being a nice combination of Murphy and Naylor, and then reassess, see where you're at. If Naylor is ready to take over, then make a move. Let Murphy go. Do something else at the position. But God, it just makes so much sense. We screamed about it at the deadline, and Murphy got better after the trade deadline. It was fantastic down the stretch for Oakland. There's no world where that doesn't make a ton of sense. And I know it's not as simple as taking Hedges at negative, 0.6, and I know this because he was on my WAR draft team, comparing that to the 5 that Murphy put up and saying, that improves Cleveland by 5 games. That's not exactly how that works, but it kind of is how that works.
Yeah, there's room for both.
3-4 wins probably to your total.
Yeah. It's a lot for a catcher. It's not just hitting big league pitching and learning how big league pitchers are going to attack you. It's learning the tendencies and preferences of every single pitcher in the organization, pretty much. And that's part of why they brought him aboard in late September. Get your feet wet. Follow Sandy Alomar around. Watch what Hedges and Meisel do every day. Talk to the pitchers. Get in a couple games. But you notice they didn't put him in a playoff game. And I think it's because that was a lot. Now, maybe they should have, but it was a lot to throw at a kid. So to just assume that he's going to come up and be your catcher and catch 140 games and everything's going to be great and he's going to post an 800 OPS and pitching staff's going to have no issues, that's unfair. So I think just because you trade for Sean Murphy doesn't mean you have to keep Sean Murphy for all 3 years of control remaining either. You can flip him after a year if Bo Naylor is the second coming. It just gives you depth. It gives you fallback option if Naylor just isn't ready. And more than anything, it gives you a really good player. I mean, the number of catchers who are good defensively and also even above average offensively are there's 4 of them. You could have 1. Maybe you could have 2. Why wouldn't you want more good players?
We mentioned some about Hedges throwing this year, and I said it's not all on him. I think Cleveland's pitchers make life difficult on the catchers as far as throwing people out. But stolen bases, there might be more of an emphasis coming up on that this year. So let me also say that Hedges was above average as far as pop time goes, and pop time on StatCast is not the be-all, end-all. Still got to be accurate with your throw, and you got to have velocity on your throw. But Hedges being a little bit above average in pop time, Sean Murphy this year, 96th percentile in pop time, 84th percentile in framing. It's not like you're giving up something defensively to now plug in a guy that's better offensively.
I don't see the downside. And you've waited out the Athletics to a point where you shouldn't have to overpay.
One prospect I'm down on since this time last year, and I focus on the negative because there was so much good in the younger players. We spent a lot of time on it. There's been almost been so much good that we didn't get to focus on anybody that did take a step back or at least didn't progress forward the way that we would have liked this year. Is there a guy, though, that in the last calendar year, your expectations have lessened a bit?
So I'm going to say Gabriel Arias, but it's a big part of it is I just don't know where he fits. I didn't know where he fit last year either, but he was coming off a really good year at AAA. They've been enamored with him 2 straight springs, but that didn't translate into anything this year. He got a call up for a doubleheader, and he played a little bit at the end of the season, and then he was their starting first baseman against the Yankees. But I don't know. That's nice that they emphasized increasing his versatility and having him play first and left. But that also tells me that they don't really know what to do with him either. And a big part of the equation, and the reason I keep pushing, you have to consolidate prospects, you have to make a trade at some point, is it's resource management. It's making sure that you don't just keep these players who are really well regarded, top 100 prospects, but because you don't have a spot for them and they turn out to not be good, they just fade into oblivion. Whereas you could have traded them when they had peak value and capitalized on that. So it requires the team to have really good internal evaluations of their own young players, but it also requires you to make some decisions. And does Arias have as much trade value now as he did a year ago? I don't know. Depends on the eye of the beholder. But you keep waiting too long, and that's how a player loses trade value and then also proves that they aren't good enough to help you. And so I don't know that he's going to go down that path, but I just think it's, he's a guy where he's kind of fallen into no man's land for me. I don't know what to make of him.
And now that he's been driven off the lot, so to speak, fair or not, there's just some personal mental bias that enters play there. And I don't know how much it impacts the front office, but it certainly impacts you and I sitting here. When he's an unproven guy that you've never seen in the minor leagues, he could literally be anything. The ceiling is sky high. And then you see them, and they might impress you and raise that expectation. Or you might see that they haven't been anything truly special yet. There's still plenty of time for Arias to be a fantastic young player. It even contributed some base hits in the playoffs. It was starting at first base. So the organization clearly trusts him to some degree. But I think you're right in that some of the shine has worn off. That had already started before the season began. I'll say Brian Rocchio only because this time last year, I kind of considered him and Valera on a similar ground. I'm not sure that I would think that now. And I certainly position the starting pitching prospects maybe even a little bit further up in my mind compared to Valera and Rocchio. And he was only 21 this year. And still okay. It wasn't like he was getting embarrassed. But once he made the jump to AAA, it was a little bit of a struggle for him. The pop is, he hit 18 home runs this year between AA and AAA. I still think there's a good player in there. But I was dreaming on like a star level player. And I think he's got some things to prove before we can say that he's back on that level.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen him enough. But it's also okay to keep someone like that at AAA. And again, if you're keeping Rosario for at least another year, you have Freeman, you have Arias, you have Rocchio, Jose Tena keeps moving up, Angel Martinez is moving up. It's like, what is What's the long-term plan here? Who's the guy? Is Jimenez the guy? And then you just need a second baseman.
Maybe.
Owen Miller, come on down.
Well, while you're thinking about timelines, I've got one final fill in the blank for you. We will see George Valera in blank.
August. This is another one when I was saying earlier, trying to discuss one player's future requires you to discuss like 10 players' futures. Think about, let's say, the scenario you threw out earlier. Let's say Gonzalez gets off to a slow start. It's late May. They want to send him down and call somebody up. Is it Nolan Jones? Is it Will Brennan? Is it Richie Palacios? Is Jhonkensy Noel tearing it up? Is it Valera? What is the order of operations? I don't know where all those guys fit. And when you're talking trade, you have to make sure, the guy you're down on, and you're like, oh, fine, we'll just move this guy. Well, the other team might be thinking that too. And they might be thinking they can buy low. So that's what makes this so tricky. I don't know. I mean, he's certainly, I would think, is going to start the season in AAA, and it'll be on him. Can he knock the door down? So I said August because it's the month I was born in, so I like it. I don't really have a strong answer here.
Oh, I love that sort of logic. Yeah, I think the thing that we lose sight of right now, I mean, even if you were to go back through every young player that has debuted over the past several years, how many of them were just because there was a circumstance where somebody got hurt, it presented the door opening for someone, even if they weren't maybe ready to go or on fire at that moment, they got the call up. They're up here now. And maybe it doesn't last very long. That's tough to predict. But, I mean, is it possible that Stephen Kwan has to go on the injured list in May and Valera's hot and he's the guy? Sure. Mm-hmm. So we think of this in terms of what would be the projection timeline for when a guy like this would arrive. And it might be April 15th. We don't know. So I think it will happen this year. That I feel really good about. He wasn't overwhelmed when he got up to AAA. It wasn't spectacular, but above water. And I think, doing that in his age 21 season, kind of similar to Rocchio, having a little bit more success than Rocchio did at AAA. It's impressive. I think you could assume he's going to really take off at the age of 22 down there. So I'll say June. June.
Right after your birthday?
Yeah, the day after, actually. Did Bieber make his debut on his birthday? When was?
I think so.
What was that?
Yeah, in Minnesota.
He made his debut
on your birthday.
Right, he made his debut on his birthday. On my birthday, right? Yeah, it was my early birthday present. Well, right on time birthday present. Yeah, there's no rhyme or reason to that. Did we think that Bieber was coming up? Yeah, that conversation beginning of that year. This is all. I mean, there's no point to it. That's the point of the show. No point to it at all. Ever projecting anything forward. Why we talk about this stuff? Nothing matters.
It worked for Seinfeld.
Thanks for listening. Show about nothing. We've been doing it since 2017. We'll be back later this week. We got some special stuff planned. I think we could do like a mailbag. Maybe ask the listeners for some questions going into the offseason over at Patreon. Sound good?
Yeah, maybe in the near future they can even join us live. How about a little Zoom room action?
You're going to come join me? You're going to get your passport and come down to where I live for that? Or what? No. Patreon.com/SelbyIsGodcast. Thanks for clicking play over at Apple Podcasts, Google, Stitcher, and Spotify. We'll see you in a couple weeks here for a free episode and later this week over at Patreon. Bye.